Because at the moment, officially, from Beijing, we are being told that Taiwan could be unified with communist China by force, right? I think that's the express doctrine. And I think that we really need to pause and think what that could involve, because when you change the constitutional position unilaterally by force, which is what Putin tried to do in February 2022, you set off a chain of events that you cannot control. And that would be my message to everybody. Trying to use force in situations like this can lead to utter disaster, not just for the world, but for you too. You're firing, as I said earlier, a Sarajevo pistol, and you don't know where it's going to end. And in that sense, I think there is a clear analogy between the two situations. And look on what the UK and Taiwan should be doing together. We're two islands, island peoples, sharing the same geostrategic perspectives. Neither of us want to see a change in the balance of power in this part of the Asia-Pacific region. Neither of us want to see a change in the composition of the first island chain. Certainly not. Nor does the United States, by the way, in my view. We share economic ambitions, and I think we should do more. I was thrilled to see that we don't have diplomatic relations, formally so-called, but we have an office, and it's very busy, and things are picking up, and there is more and more work being done, and the volume of trade both ways is actually growing, which is a great thing. Now is the time to show that we care. Now is the time to show that we believe in these values and that we're willing to stand together with Taiwan. Because the more emphatic we can be now about the need to protect freedom in Taiwan, the more misery, believe me, we can save later on. I'm absolutely certain of that. And I think the next question was, what do we do? Somebody asked, rather flatteringly, what advice would I have to engage with Donald Trump? I mean, I think, I believe that the president is fundamentally a big supporter of Taiwan, and I think that he's in a position now where he's having to be a bit tactical rather than strategic, because he's trying to do a trade deal with China, as everybody knows, and that's why we're seeing some of this slightly puzzling events of the last few days. But I think fundamentally, Donald Trump is going to want to make sure that his presidency, I'm sure of this, his presidency is going to perpetuate a free, democratic Taiwan. And he certainly won't want to see that extinguished in his time. That's for what you do on the tariffs. Well, obviously, I would say actually that the claim of Taiwan under the Montevideo Convention of 1933, the claim of Taiwan to be recognized by the British state is far more robust, because they actually have a recognized government, and they actually have boundaries that they control. They actually have a proper democratic system, none of which you could say about, with all due respect, none of which you could say about Palestine, least of all those parts that are currently governed by Hamas, right? So there's clearly a distinction there. But, as I said this morning, it's obvious from all my conversations here that is not where the people of Taiwan are. And they don't actively seek to change unilaterally the status quo by getting recognition as an independent country. They're not asking for that. They're not even asking for that, right? They're asking for something much, much more modest. All they're asking for is the right to be left in peace as a free, democratic country, and not bullied or coerced, and not threatened with the imposition of rule by the Chinese Communist Party. That's all they're asking for. Not threatened with violence, by the way. So I would say that the claims of Taiwan, the actual, under the terms of normal conventions on recognition of states, the claims of Taiwan are far more robust, but the ambitions and requests of the people of Taiwan are extremely modest, and I think that needs also to be respected. And you asked, I think, somebody asked a question about semiconductors. Is that right? And what's happening with the U.S. setting up a semiconductor fab in the United States? So Trump setting up a semiconductor. Did somebody ask that?
Yeah.
I think that's right. Look, as I said this morning, when I became Prime Minister in 2019, I was acutely conscious of this imperative for the UK to try to catch up in what was obviously the crucial industrial component of the 21st century, these really amazing semiconductors, these microprocessors. And as I said this morning, I said to my team in Number 10, I said, what would it cost to make a fab? What would it cost to make a fabrication plant? And they said about £9 billion. And I said, well, that's not a huge amount of money, but maybe it was worth doing anyway if we could somehow recover our technological edge in this area, because it's clearly so important. And then they said, well, actually, yes, we could do it, but it would take an awfully long time to set up, and then we might not even be able to produce chips, microprocessors of the same quality as Taiwan, because by the time we've taken to get the whole thing going, Taiwan would have improved. And so in the end, our best bet, I think, is to protect Taiwan and make sure that we have a strong relationship between the UK and Taiwan, and are able to import Taiwanese microprocessors. And because you guys are brilliant at it, and you have a world lead, and it's a simply astonishing fact. 95%, possibly even more, of the microprocessors needed for advanced AI, which is the most extraordinary cognitive advance of my lifetime. 95% of the chips you need for AI are made here, actually made here in Taiwan. And one of the many reasons why we should develop our relationship. And then John from the Times asked a question about strategic clarity and the fateful ambiguity before the invasion of Ukraine. It's a very, very good question, and it was spot on, because I do agree with you. One of the problems with Ukraine was that we were, and it's still a problem, we're still not willing to say that Ukraine should be part of NATO, right? We're still not being clear about the ultimate geostrategic destination, security destination of Ukraine. That is a problem. That is a fateful ambiguity. And actually, I think that if we'd been clear about it before 2022, and if the Americans had got their way in 2008, and if Ukraine had been part of NATO, as George Bush requested, then it is conceivable that invasion by Putin would never have happened. So I think you're really onto something. But I think that what the difficulty with the analogies are imperfect, right? Between Ukraine and Taiwan, there's not a direct read across, and the crucial difference is, of course, that Ukraine is and had been a sovereign state since 1991, internationally recognized, not least by Russia and China and everybody else, right? Taiwan, as we've been discussing, is in a different case, different position. And despite having, as I say, so many of the seeming attributes of statehood and so many of the claims for international recognition, it is a measure of the modesty of the people of Taiwan that they don't even want that. They're not calling for that. They just want to protect the status quo. They just want to settle this problem in peace across the Straits of Taiwan. And so I think you're right in what you say about Ukraine, but the read across doesn't quite work, if that makes sense.